It's Tigran Petrosian with the white pieces against Ivan Radulov, and we are kicking things off with an English opening. Let's see what the former world champion has in store. A very symmetrical start. White plays pawn to c4, black answers with pawn to c5. Both sides develop their knights and prepare to fianchetto their bishops. A classic strategic battle is brewing. White prepares to expand on the queen side, playing pawn to a3 and rook to b1. Black puts the brakes on with pawn to a5 before both sides safely tuck their kings away by castling. The maneuvering begins. White's bishop comes to g5, pinning the knight, but black immediately challenges it with pawn to f6. The pieces shuffle around as both players look for the right moment to strike. And here's the first slip from white. The knight drops back to c2, which is a bit too passive. The real opportunity was to immediately challenge on the queen side with pawn to b4, grabbing space and initiative. Black seizes the moment. With white playing passively, Radulov launches a powerful central strike, pushing the d-pawn first to d5, then all the way to d4, clamping down on the position. White finally gets the queenside pawn break in with b4. After a quick exchange of pawns on c5, the b-file is now open, creating new targets and lines of attack for both players. But now, black makes an inaccuracy. Queen to d7 is a fine developing move, but it misses the most precise idea. The engine preferred rook to c8, immediately fighting for control of the newly opened files. A classic Petrosian move. The knight retreats all the way back to a1, a very subtle maneuver with a deadly purpose. It's heading for the fantastic b3 square, and black makes a major positional mistake. Bishop to h3 looks active, attacking the f-pawn, but it completely ignores the real threat on the other side of the board. The correct plan was to challenge white's knight immediately. Knight to b4 was the move. After knight to b3, rook to c8 holds the line. White can win a pawn with knight takes a5, but after bishop to h3, black is still in the game. But in the actual game, black plays bishop to h3, and this gives Petrosian the opening he's been waiting for. Brilliant! The knight lands on b3, and it's a fantastic piece sacrifice. Petrosian is willing to give up material to blast open the queen side and get at the black king. Black has no choice but to take the bishop on g2, hoping to muddy the waters, and Petrosian recaptures with the king. An absolutely critical move. King takes g2 is the only way to keep the winning advantage, keeping the king safe while preparing to continue the attack. In a tough position, black lashes out with pawn to e4. It's a desperate attempt to create counterplay, but it just makes things worse. A quieter defense was needed. The best try was knight to d8. Then, after knight takes c5, queen to c6 with check, knight to e4 blocks, and after knight to e6, black is still fighting. Instead of that solid defense, the pawn rushes forward to e4, and now white's attack becomes overwhelming. And here comes the thunder. The knight captures on c5, the sacrifice is accepted, and the decisive combination begins. Black throws in a desperate check, pushing the pawn to f3, but Petrosian is ice cold, simply taking back with pawn takes f3. It's the only move, and it keeps the attack roaring forward. Black gives one last check, capturing on f3 again with the e-pawn. Unbelievable! A brilliant queen sacrifice. Petrosian plays queen takes f3. He gives up his most powerful piece to deflect the black rook and deliver the knockout blow. Black has to take the queen. The rook captures on f3, and that's the point. The white knight swoops in to d7, capturing the queen and forking the rooks. White emerges with a decisive material advantage, and the game is over. In a completely lost position, black's rook takes the pawn on d3, but it's not enough to change the outcome. Now it's just a matter of technique for Petrosian. His bishop comes to g5, the knight jumps to c5, and he forces a series of trades that simplifies the position into a clearly won endgame. The dust settles after a flurry of captures. White pushes the pawn to f6, creating a monster-passed pawn that completely paralyzes black's remaining pieces. And that's a mistake. The bishop retreats to f8, but that f6 pawn is the biggest threat on the board. Black had to play bishop takes f6, even if it meant giving up the piece. A rare moment of imprecision from the master of technique. Knight to e4 is a strong move, but there was an even more clinical path to victory. The most crushing move was knight to e6. After bishop to b4, rook to c1 is decisive. Then, after g4, rook to c2 wraps things up. In the game, though, Petrosian plays the knight to e4, still completely winning, but giving black a tiny glimmer of hope. But black immediately misses the chance to create problems, pushing the pawn to c2. This move doesn't pose any real threats and allows white to consolidate. White plays rook to b2. Another slight slip, but it hardly matters in a position this dominant. The win is still easily within reach, and this is the final decisive blunder. The knight jumps to d4, walking right into a tactical refutation. The last chance was to activate the rook. The only try was rook to e8. After knight takes g5, rook to e5 fights on. Then, after h4, the rook can swing to e2. But instead of activating his rook, black plays the knight to d4, and this allows white to end the game with force. The simplest and best reply. White's rook slides to c1, pinning the loose pawn and highlighting the mistake of black's last move. Black's rook finally moves to e8, but it's one move too late, and that's the game. The knight snaps up the pawn on g5, and with multiple unstoppable threats, black has seen enough. A brilliant attacking victory, and Tigran Petrosian wins. A quiet, strategic opening exploded into a tactical masterpiece crowned by a spectacular queen sacrifice. A true Petrosian classic.